got such a great story. Can you tell us a bit about how you got to where you are? You know, the first female Asian American showrunner on The Walking Dead, are the one who will be bringing this show to its conclusion. And we would love to hear about your own career trajectory to get to this point.
I think, I've always been somebody who loved to write from the time I was a kid, and just a very artsy kid. I did music, I painted, I was in drama club and all of that stuff. I studied English and theater as an undergrad, and then kind of around LA for a long time working different jobs. I did a lot of theater in Los Angeles as a playwright, a producer, a director, an actor, all of that stuff. But I didn't really think that was something that I would do as a professional career. It was just something I did out of love. But at a certain point, I felt like I'd go for it. But I honestly didn't see a lot of people who looked like me in those roles as a writer. And so that was a little daunting. I went to grad school at USC for screenwriting, basically, or writing for screen and television or some crazy name like that. And while I was there, I did a diversity program at CBS at the same time. And so with that combination of doing a mentorship program where I met a lot of people and writing samples at USC, and I was very fortunate that I got staffed on my first job coming right out of school. The show never went to air, which is, it's like one of those things that's so crushing, that I think probably everybody has gone through on this panel. You think oh my God, I've got this thing and then it doesn't work. And I had one of the so-called diversity slots on the staff, which is, it was a great way in, but there's so much stigma that can be attached to it, even though I had the top writing fellowship at USC. I had all this plays that had been produced, short films that had gone to festival and things like that. And so it's this weird experience of feeling you belong there, and yet you feel like you don't belong there.
Yeah.
And which I think is a very common experience, particularly at that time. From there, I went to another show kind of right off the bat, wonderful show that lasted one season called Terriers. Mm-hmm. And when that did not get picked up again for a second season, I was going to be looking for another job. My manager asked, what's your dream show? And I said, The Walking Dead. There had been one season, I'd read all the comic books, and I got that meeting, and I've been here ever since. And I had no idea this ride would last this long, or that I would eventually rise to run the show, because I came in as a fan, and it's been really just gratifying, and I've loved getting to work with people from so many different walks of life, in the cast, on the crew, on the writer's side. And so that's been a really special experience for me. It's where I've spent the last decade plus of my career. I just kind of worked and worked and worked, and somehow the opening was there. But
This question is for Angela and Matt. Obviously, everyone is focused on having a diverse writer's room. Matt, I know you and Angela worked together on The Walking Dead, and now you went off to staff your own show. How important is it to both of you to have a diverse writer's room, and how do you go about selecting the mix of writers on your respective shows? I'd love to hear your perspectives on that process and how it has shifted recently, if in fact it has.
It's a great question because, obviously, diversity is something that's always been on the forefront of my mind. And when I finally kind of rose up in the position to hire my own staff, it really was important to me. And this is something that I took from all the other shows I'd worked on, which is writers in general. It's funny, they each bring themselves to what they do. Writing is such a personal thing. And it really is sort of our life experiences define who we are, and who we are ends up on the page one way or another. And, for me, it really is about, looking at the room and looking at who I want on the show, and having a group of people that can complement each other, but each have their own life experience that they can bring to the table, and their own opinions and their own thoughts. And, it's interesting because essentially what you want to do as a writer on it is sort of figure out what's important to the showrunner and adapt what you do to the voice of the show. And I do think that's important, but at the same time, it's critical, I think, that every writer bring themselves to the scripts, to the stories, and are pitching their ideas that all come from their past experiences. I never think of it as my show. It's our show, and it's all our voices together that really create what ends up on screen.
This question is for Matt and Nico. Felix and Will's relationship on World Beyond is such an important storyline. You are both important voices in the LGBTQ plus community. What were some of the conversations you two had in developing and bringing the relationship to life?
Felix and Will have been this show. You know, romance kind of takes a back seat on this show. And, you know, in the original conversations that I had with both Matt and Scott, the only thing I really knew about Felix, besides him being a vegetarian, was that he was queer, and he was in a relationship, and we were going to see this relationship on camera. And I think, especially in this universe of The Walking Dead, it was really important for me to be able to play the hero in so many ways, right? Not be defined by a sexuality. Felix and Will are gay men, yes, but it is not a point of conversation throughout that show. That's where we really need to see identity move in terms of representation. It just is. We are all individuals, you know, with our own stories and our own histories and our own, you know, present realities. And what's coming in this next season with Felix and Will is incredible. A relationship dynamic that hasn't really been showcased on television. And Jelani, who plays Will, is such an incredible actor and just a force of a human being, and it's really been a joy bringing that character to life.
And both of you guys are so great together too. Every time you guys are on screen together, you feel the chemistry, and that makes my job easy because I feel like I have to write less because you guys just bring it on screen. So, and I'll just really quickly, I'll say too that you know, when Scott and I were first talking about this show, it's like we realized that, you know, this was going to be a younger show, and the first thing for me I thought about in creating these characters is, you know, when I was younger, who would I have wanted to see on screen that I felt like I didn't see? And in a role like this, just seeing a man who was gay was not something that I saw before growing up. And so I just kind of put myself in my younger self's shoes in creating the character. And I just love the fact that yes, Felix is gay, but he's also this protector, and there's so much more to him. And the fact that he's sort of stepping up, and you know, he has these issues from his past, and they define who they are, who he is. But really, at his heart, like Nico said, it's like he's a hero. He's this mini superhero, I guess, in a way. Not even mini. I think he is. It's just that he is a hero who happens to be gay, and I just think that's so important. It was so important to me, and that really resonates to those who watch the show.
Danay, you have been on Fear the Walking Dead for several seasons now. Do you think that there are more opportunities for women and people of color on screen now versus when you started in the industry? And what real life experiences led themselves to the way you bring Luciana to life on screen?
Talking about diversity and everybody's backgrounds and where we come from, one of the most important things of storytelling is that we really tell our stories, and our characters, they have a past. So if you get actors that also have a past, and we are all diverse, my take on the apocalypse is completely different than Rubén's take on the apocalypse. And Angela, and all because we have a past as actors, our contribution to each one of the roles and our stories and arts, that's what makes it all interesting to kind of like watch together. I cannot even imagine us being from one place. I'm just like, you know, playing the roles from one direction. It's like big, massive situation could mean something to me, and it's something to like Khary, or we all interact. And I feel like, you know, being Latina, being a woman, and you know, and my role is from Mexico. It's like I really take very seriously of how I portray this role and how other people can relate to this woman, even people that are not even Latinos, you know. And I think that, you know, I feel like that has been my contribution to the show, and hopefully for showrunners and everybody that is writing out there, they can see a massive potential to keep writing for women and strong women. And, you know, talking about diversity, I grew up, you know, watching American television. So for me, I never thought of like, oh, I was not even, you know, in television, American, like me we're not that many. So when I come up on this show, which is like, you know, a huge range of like, you can see it all over the world, I was like, oh, I'm here, and it's time to like give my best, and it's time to like do everything I can to contribute, and it's such a gift. So I feel like more roles are coming up. I notice that every time I go to Comic-Con, and you know, as years go by, like World Beyond, I see Latinas, and I see, you know, as the world expands, it's just lovely and beautiful to see diversity everywhere.
Rubén, your story and background are so interesting. Can you tell us a bit about your life growing up in Panama? You can dabble in some music information if you'd like to share it with us. And also, Daniel Salazar is a survivor. How did you use your story and background to help bring this amazing character to life?
First, in Panama, because I was born in Panama, we have coasts on both sides. It's very important to understand that I grew up in a society where everybody in the world was represented.
Mm.
Panama was sort of like a version of New York in the sense that when people ask me, you live in the United States? I say, no, I live in New York. And it also creates a bubble. You have to be careful, understand what the rest of the country is like. I was in touch with all kinds of people coming from all walks of life and all over the world. So I was not intimidated by difference. That's one. Number two, I come from a very strong family of women. The women in my family were very, very strong. And so you learn a lot of things that men would not be able to teach you. Like my father was not very demonstrative guy. I know he loved us, but he had his own way of showing it. But you had like my grandmother and my mother were the ones who were on top of us. What are you doing? Who are you going? All that. So you learn the best way to deal with situations from women who were like the ones administering the house. And that was not only in the house, but also in everybody else's houses. Because all the mothers, they didn't want their sons to be hanging out with somebody who would then teach them some. So every mother in my neighborhood, every mother was everybody else's mother in a way. Right. And also they had telepathic powers. He knew everything we were going to say and do before we even opened our mouth. By the time I got to New York, as a Latin immigrant, I did not feel intimidated. Mm-hmm. I felt right in. And I had seen a lot of movies growing up. I mean, that was one of the things that we did all the time, watch movies, and went to the movie theaters was very close to the house. Cost a dime, you go and see movies, and television I got to see later because we didn't have money for a television on set until I was very familiar with movies and actors. I didn't see many Latin actors, right? and this is something that I take the opportunity. One of the reasons that I took this job and The Walking Dead, Dave Erickson offered it, and I'm very thankful to Dave for making me a part of this, was that we don't see really many Latinos in film, and we don't see many Latinos on television either. I mean, if you look at the Oscars, we have one person win Best Actor in 1951, Jose Ferrer. Then we got Anthony Quinn win twice for Zapata and for Lust for Life, supporting actor, and then we had Benicio win in 2001. We have never had a woman win Best Actress. We had only 4 women nominated for Best Actress. And we have one woman, Rita Moreno, who's out of this world. Rita won for supporting actress. So we don't really get that many opportunities. So when we have a show, we're very careful to do our best. Yes. Because we're going to be measured by standards that are not applied to other groups. Right. So we have to be very, very careful and do it the best way we can so we can leave the door open for others to follow. That's right. Although, again, even though we're 19% of the population of the United States, we still are not represented the way we should. This is a good beginning. Another thing I wanted to say about AMC, I don't know how many times this was ever done, but I know AMC did it. They did a whole show. I think it was 3 or 4. They did a whole show in Spanish and on prime time. I don't know if that was ever done.
It's the first time, and it was the most watched episode on television.
And it was
your episode, Rubén.
It was well received. People have thought, okay, our audience is watching the thing. It's in Spanish. Oh, change this. This is not Telemundo. Change this. And they moved somewhere else. They did not. It was very well received, the episode, which means that people are more open now. This diversity, and I applaud AMC for doing that. And as far as the Daniel scenario, I'm a lawyer by trade. A long story how I ended up being a musician first, and then an actor. But I studied law, and I worked with people in jail. I was in law school in Panama. And so, again, observation. My father was a detective, so I picked up a lot of him, also the things that he does. Reading between lines. So all of these observations informed me to be able to perform as Daniel Salazar, which I think is just a wonderful, complex character. And the cat is alive.
Moving on to you, Khary. Turn your mic, Khary. As an African-American actor working on a hit show, you have always been vocal about your family's personal journey. How does that help inform your portrayal of Ezekiel or your career in general?
I think that just means I talk too much. Or maybe I talk just enough. Didn't truly realize why I decided to do this business of storytelling. until many years later, and I have this show to thank for that because it was so popular that you go and talk to people and they come to you and you take pictures, you sign autographs and all of that, and all of that is wonderful and great. But there are those moments when those people that I would never meet otherwise in my life come from far and wide to tell me why something I said, something on this character's journey got them through, and not got them through, a bad day. They got them through depression. They got them through cancer treatment. They got them through survival. They got their kid, who went AWOL in half a world away, and was struggling with drug abuse, and they tell me this story, and then a year and a half later, that kid comes up, and I can see it in his eyes before he even says a word, and I realize the power of all of this. So when I speak of my family and who I am and where I'm from. And it is because everything I do, as far as storytelling, is intensely personal. The journey that we take to tell this story in this particular setting, is incredibly personal to me because Ezekiel as a character gets treated differently than I would. We're both pretty affable guys, but in this world, everyone is seen as a threat. In my life, I am seen as a threat. Everybody isn't seen as a threat because everyone is seen as a threat in this world. Feel more. Equality isn't necessarily about somebody coming up. Sometimes everybody, we're all on the same level, and there's a learning that happens because of that. And so I continue to learn every day, because of this storytelling, because we're telling a different story.
Alexa, your character is part of a diverse family with both Iris and Hope being adopted by mixed race parents. So why is it important to show these non-traditional families on TV today, even in an apocalyptic setting?
Just with what's happened in the past 2 years or so, it doesn't feel like we're taking very many steps forward. It kind of feels like we're going back in time. I mean, I remember growing up, I came from a Mexican mom and an Egyptian dad. 9/11 hit, and my family was vilified. They thought that, I got called names on the street. My dad got called names. My mom was always being called names because she was Hispanic. It doesn't happen anymore. I haven't noticed that. I feel like there's some races that are becoming a little more equal with everybody else. But at the same time, we're not where we should be. And AMC has done an incredible job, and not just with whether you're Black, Hispanic, even what you identify as, the LGBTQ community, everything. I don't think I've ever been so grateful for a job. I got typecast as a Middle Eastern girl for so many roles before this, or the Mexican immigrant, and when I got this, I was like, Hope is anything. Hope could be whatever she wants. Kids aren't like, oh, Hope is this, so that means I can't relate to her because I'm not that. They see her and they see Iris, and they're like, okay, well, she's doing it, so I could do it. What's kind of an apocalypse, regardless of whether it's a TV show or not.
Lauren, why is it important for the deaf community to be represented on screen with actual actors who are deaf? And what does it mean to you to be on the show and to be a representative of that important community?
Well, I do want to go back a little bit to what Khary was actually talking about earlier about being seen as a threat. And I can definitely relate to that in a way. I was never looked at as a threat, but the issue for me growing up was not being seen, feeling invisible most of the time. And because so many people are taught it's not polite to look, well, wait, don't look at them. So if you see a person with a disability or a person who's signing, it's not polite to look or stare. So I think that's what it means for me now as a deaf actor. Playing an actual authentic character who's deaf on the screen means that we are seeing, we're acknowledging, we're recognizing, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity for people who are not involved in the disabled community or the deaf community to just finally watch and gawk in the safety of their own home. They actually really can stare and learn at the same time. And oftentimes I think people ask me, what's it like being deaf? Honestly, I can't tell you what it's like being deaf because deaf is just one thing. It becomes more relatable and easier to describe when I can stack it onto another layer to it. And then that, I think, is what Connie, my character, is doing. She is just being somebody who is deaf, who also is being a big sister, a protector. And also she's Black, she's Latina, she's also all these, she's a journalist. So I think Connie has all of those layers. And I think that through those layers that I feel like the audience can actually truly see an authentic deaf experience, because now they have somebody that they can compare their experience to and make those connections. Oh, I'm a woman too. Make those connections. And I think what I love about playing Connie and on The Walking Dead is just that I get to explore my intersection of identity. And I want to remind all of you, I'm not only deaf, but I'm also a woman, and I'm Black, and I'm also Hispanic. I mean, there's more to me than just that. So I do feel like that there's the only way to really authentically come through on the screen. Honestly, I feel like, and I'm sorry if I'm speaking for the creative team, but, I honestly feel like the creative team doesn't have that true feeling of where to start with deaf representation. But what the creative team does have is courage, that they don't have fear to admit that they need to learn things. And I've seen so much develop in the last few years, 2 characters on the show that show the spectrum of being deaf, of the deaf community. We have somebody like Connie who's profoundly deaf, and she has always been deaf. She's never had that feeling of losing, as opposed to her sister, Kelly, who's played by Angel Khary, who is going through that hearing loss journey, which is completely different. And I just think that, I'm just so proud of The Walking Dead to include those stories. And I think that it shows so much representation in itself.
The global pandemic, lockdown, and the world's reaction to it all spark any new themes or ideas for the Walking Dead franchise?
Like Alexa said, it does feel like in some ways we are living through an apocalypse. Things that we're seeing now that we've never seen before, to the degree we've never seen before. And it was interesting for me, just having worked on season 1 of World Beyond, the fact that it was delayed a number of months because of the pandemic, and this thing of being trapped inside your house and not knowing what's going out in the world, and even sort of intellectually knowing but not being out there to experience because it's not safe. And I was in my head about how sort of what the characters of World Beyond were going through is actually sort of what's happening in the world. Like, it's not safe to go out there. And what happens to you though if you're not sort of equipped to deal with what's happening in the world. So I would just say on those levels, it sort of just became life imitating art, I guess, in so many ways.
I'll say too on Walking Dead, like, just, there's such a lead time for our storytelling, so and because some of our main season was pushed back, but we had already kind of locked in a lot of our story before we kind of pivoted to doing a season 10 extension episodes. What we found was that a lot of the themes that we were already working with in this particular section of the comic book, where we were starting with people dealing with scarcity, and they join a community and come across a community that is very class divisions are just on full display, and everybody has kind of had to just separate along these lines, which they haven't had to deal with in a long time. We just found that there was so much that we were seeing happening in real time that I think just kind of informed things we were working on anyway. So it's just life imitating art and art imitating life and all of that. So it was a very surreal experience. And I think, touching back on something Matt said earlier in this conversation, I think like we as writers, and I think everybody as an artist, like you are bringing your experience into things. So even if there are times when we probably are not consciously writing about these, couple of years that we've been living through as a global community, you can't help but have some of those things, those feelings that are running through you show in the work as well. And it's been interesting as we've been turning in cuts of the show to the network and even scripts, and they'll say, oh my God, like I'm so connected to this, feels like how it felt with like this piece of the pandemic. And we're like, oh, that's interesting. That's not even consciously what we were equating it to, but I think those things will infuse any art that's being created, because sometimes there are conscious choices and sometimes it's just what you are living is just flowing through, and we can't help that.
This is our last question. This is for anyone that wants to get in. What do you love about being a part of the Walking Dead universe, and what does this franchise?
What Angela and Matt were saying just about the timing of this all, I feel so well prepared for life currently. I mean, the fact that we did shoot the first season of World Beyond right before 2020, and then shot the second season deep in it, I feel equipped, and I'm really appreciative of that for sure.
I want to add, when we were in season 8, when the pandemic hit, and we stopped our season 6 for 7 months before we finished it. And during that time period, I was worried, oh my God, now we're going through a pandemic. How is our fans are doing? Like, are they willing to get more apocalypse on the screen now? Like, are we too much? Is this gonna be like, it's gonna hurt us? Or how is our audience, right? And when we came back, when our show aired, the response that I got is like, finally you guys are back, because that means that there's some sort of normality now. We are seeing the characters we love. I was like, oh my God. I mean, it's not just about the walkers. It's not about the dead. It's about the living. Yeah. And our audience is all about that. It's like how we are surviving as, these characters. And that was a really cool thing to be part of. It's like we bring so much comfort and a sense of normality, because we've been on for so many years that the one thing they've been missing during that, the time that we were off. So it's I'm just very proud to be, unemployed, Rubén, and also the fact that we can still bring some light to the world during these dark times.
Listen,
I just wanted to jump in and just go back to your question. What I really love about the show is probably the same reason why the show has such a global fan base, because I think the show really addresses all the needs from like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think that goal for all of us really is just have self-fulfillment. We move from our basic needs, your food, your shelter, but then also all these shows really explore that moving up of those hierarchy of needs. So I think that's what's so fascinating. I think it's so lovely because it actually responds to the reason why all of us get up in the morning.
I just wanted to add something to what he was saying. Just the world right now, the world as we know it, the real world, is so full of horrible examples about human behavior, lack of solidarity, racism, exclusion, that it takes a television show to remind people of who we are, who we were, and what we can be together.
Exactly.
That is very, very important. The world that represents us politically is failing us, and yet possibilities are kept alive by shows like the ones that we're doing.